Last time from this model 6.2, and we did this one way of using sequences to move two different type of parts forward throughout the system. And we set up a two sequences table. One we call it sequence old, the other one we call it sequence new. And the old sequences actually represent the parts flow through the system corresponding to each workstation and what are the processing time. Sequence new actually corresponding to the new part. Then we set up a so-called part table, and specify what type of entity they are, what kind of mixture they are, and referring back to the part sequences in this table as well, referring back to the process. And today we're going to show you a new method to do this. It's a little bit more straightforward. We don't need this two anymore, so I'm going to remove this column and also remove the processing time. We're going to create another table directly, and we call this table, for example, entity table, entity sequence. Okay, and again we're going to choose, and first we're going to use the part type as a key to indicate what sequence they are. So I'm going to make this one as the part type as one of the key, and the entity table also I'm going to create a foreigner key up here, and the foreigner key also going to call it part type. Okay, it's referring to the tables from the table parts part type as well. And so this one will be the foreigner key to referring to the foreigner key, and I'm going to move it to the left. So here we can choose sequence O, and the sequence, just like before, is from workstation to hand to pack and to exit shipping. Okay, also I'm going to create that for the new parts in one single table altogether. So workstation, new pan, packing, and shipping. Alright, and also, and like these two original sequence table, I'm going to create one single processing time column. So I'm going to create expression column and call this processing time. Okay, and of course I'm going to specify this is units is time, and time unit is based on minutes. And since I already make those, I'm just going to copy these over to this integrated sequence table and copy the new one accordingly. So what I do is actually I create a sequence table, indexes by part type was a key, and follow their sequence. So if you go back to the table parts, you will see that all part has its own sequence, set of sequence and table, and the new part also have its own parts and sequences and table. So already set it up like this instead of using the before. And still going back here, all I have to do is in the entering portion, still using the same part type and using part type, and the part type is actually based on the mixture table parts mixture 70-30 and based on random row. And also also for each one of those entity, now I can just say, instead of specify a sequence, I'm just going to say, okay, follow your entity sequence together, both of them, and then that's it. Okay, so I'm going to follow their entity sequence, and so on create also I can specify they are going to follow their own entity sequence in here as well. Okay, and then instead of the processing time over here, we don't have these processing time anymore. All I have to do is go to the entity sequence and choosing processing time that way. Okay, and I'm going to do this for all the other workstation as well. Like before, we can press Control key and select all the parts. I'm going to editing the processing time portion is entity sequence table, the processing time. Okay, so we should see this running really quick. So we still see this exactly the same effect. The old part goes to the bottom, the new part goes to the top, and so on and so forth. Okay, and how do I verify this is correct? So I'm going to start using a slightly changing of the original model, just illustrate how I'm verifying all the correct item times and everything. So I'm going to let this stop, and what I'm going to do first, I'm going to make it the processing time instead of a random number, I'm going to using a more straightforward number. So here I'm going to using 22 minutes, and sorry, I'm going to use workstation 15 minutes for example, and this one I'm going to use 20 minutes for that. Okay, I'm going to leave one for showing, and this one I'm going to use for 20 minutes, and this guy I'm going to roughly using as a 50 minutes, and so on. So I can actually verify they are following the right, using the right times in each one of the workstation. I'm trying to demonstrate that. How do I know actually processing time? If I put it here as a random number, how do I know they are using in the correct manner? And quickly, these are just for you to later on for debugging purpose. I'm going to go back to the model entity, adding a new attribute or state variable, model entity state variable. I'm going to call that processing time. Just call it PT. Okay, and this processing time is supposed to be a time number, is supposed to be a unit. So initially I'm going to initiate them as 0 to begin with. So I'm going back to the model, I'm trying to show that. Here I'm just going to use PT. Same thing for the old entity. I'm going to using it as a PT right here. So now zooming in, showing that I'm holding on the control key, and you can rotate this tag. So kind of this tag kind of just right along the entity right here. Okay, shrink a little bit. Line. So we can have these two called processing time. And in each workstation, before we come into the enter, actually I'm assigning model entity PT to the value of entity table, entity sequence, processing time. Okay. So now on enter, I know this is happening. Actually, I'm not going to do that today, and I'm going to delete that and show you another way using an add-on process. So I'm going to start an add-on process. Come in here. I'm going to add create a process on its own. I'm going to call this process called Mark PT. Okay, I'm going to call this process called Mark PT. Basically, I'm going to assign, okay, the model entity PT actually to a specific value. Okay, the value is sorry, the wrong place. I'm going to copy here and call this entity sequence processing time. Okay, so I'm adding one common so-called mark processing time, and I'm assigning the processing time into model entity PT, and therefore I can use all these portion. So here add-on process on enter. On enter, have one for calling it Mark PT. Alright, and same thing, I'm going to assign all these three into the add-on process, entering, also choosing Mark PT. Okay, what it does is I'm going to start running this. You will see that each one of those are, I'm going to slow this down a little bit to show you, and you can see that each place actually it got marked one of those, but you can see the number right now is in terms of hours. So 15 minutes is an hour. So I'm going to come into the process. Instead of assigning just the processing time, I'm going to times 60 to begin with, and then I'm going to see how the process is going. You can see that at workstation, either they got assigned it to 15 minutes or got assigned it to 20 minutes, and that's actually matching with whatever processing time I have over here. And the same thing in the new pen, I have 50 minutes, and the regular pen I have 20 minutes. You can verify that with processing time. So here is the way I verify myself how actually the assigning of the processing time is correctly assigned using these tag on the entity, and demonstrate, or so-called anime, they are correctly assigned. So this is concluding this section.